In the year 2000, a struggling startup with under 300,000 customers walked into a boardroom and offered to sell itself for $50 million. The people in that room didn't just say no. According to the founders who were there, they laughed. 10 years later, that company filed for bankruptcy. The startup they laughed out of the room? Today, it's worth more than $250 billion. This is the story of the single afternoon that decided the fate of two companies and the pattern of decisions that followed it. This is the business verdict. To understand how big this mistake really was, you have to understand what Blockbuster was in the year 2000. This wasn't just a company, it was a Friday night ritual for millions of American families. Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores across the world, nearly 60,000 employees, around $6 billion in annual revenue. It was, without question, the king of home entertainment. And then there was Netflix. Founded in 1997 by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, it wasn't a store at all. It was a small startup that mailed DVDs to your house. No due dates, no late fees. By 2000, Netflix had fewer than 300,000 subscribers. It was losing money every quarter. The dot-com bubble was bursting, investors were panicking, and Netflix needed one thing to survive: capital or a powerful partner. So Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph made a decision that, looking back, took real nerve. They decided to fly to Dallas and pitch a merger to the one company big enough to make Netflix disappear overnight: Blockbuster. Here's what most people miss about this story. Netflix wasn't approaching Blockbuster from a position of strength. They were approaching from weakness. This wasn't arrogance, it was survival. The idea was simple. Netflix would run the online mail order side of the business. Blockbuster would keep doing what it did best: its physical stores. Together, they'd cover every angle of the market. On paper, it wasn't a crazy idea. It was actually a reasonable partnership, one that could have let Blockbuster own the future of video rental before anyone else even saw it coming. But to make that pitch happen, Netflix needed Blockbuster's CEO to say yes. And that meant walking into a room with a man named John Antioco. Transition to point 2 title card. In early 2000, Hastings and Randolph flew into Dallas, Texas, and walked into Blockbuster's headquarters, a massive corporate tower that made their entire company look like a rounding error by comparison. They sat down at a glass conference table with Antioco and his executive team and made their pitch. Blockbuster buys Netflix, and the two companies build a blended business together. Antioco listened. Then he asked one question: how much would Blockbuster need to pay? The answer was $50 million. According to Netflix's own team, the response wasn't a careful, considered no. It was closer to disbelief. Barry McCarthy, Netflix's CFO at the time, later said Blockbuster's executives practically laughed them out of the building. Now here's where this channel does something a lot of business videos skip. Not everyone agrees on exactly how that meeting went. Years later, John Antioco publicly disputed this version of events, saying there were never any serious acquisition talks between the two companies that day. Netflix's team maintains their account is accurate. We can't put you inside that room in the year 2000, so we're telling you both sides instead of picking the one that sounds better on camera. What both sides do agree on is the outcome. Blockbuster did not buy Netflix. And whatever exactly happened in that room, the decision that followed is where our story really begins. It's easy to look back today and call this the worst business decision of the century. But if you were sitting in Antioco's chair in the year 2000, the choice may not have looked so obviously wrong. Broadband internet was still rare in most American homes. DVDs themselves were a new format most people hadn't adopted yet. And Netflix at the time had fewer customers than a single mid-sized Blockbuster region. On top of that, the dot-com bubble was actively collapsing around them. Dozens of internet startups were failing every month. From where Blockbuster stood, Netflix looked like just another one of them. This is the part of the story that most videos leave out. Blockbuster's decision wasn't stupidity, it was a reasonable bet based on the information available that happened to be wrong. Here's where things start to go wrong for Blockbuster. Not in one moment, but slowly, over years. It took Blockbuster 4 full years to launch its own online rental service. By the time Blockbuster Online arrived in 2004, Netflix had already spent 4 years building subscribers, refining its mailing system, and learning exactly what customers wanted. Years after that, in 2006, Blockbuster introduced something called Total Access, letting customers rent online and return movies in store. It was actually a smart idea. But smart ideas executed too late and too hesitantly don't save companies. Blockbuster's own board was still focused on protecting store profits. Franchisees pushed back against anything that threatened in-store traffic. Eventually, Blockbuster even eliminated its late fees. The same late fees that Reed Hastings has said inspired Netflix's entire business model in the first place. But even that move came too late to change the outcome. Every single one of these moves had the same pattern: reactive, delayed, and permanently one step behind. Transition to point 5. While Blockbuster was still trying to perfect its DVD rental business, Netflix was quietly preparing to make DVDs irrelevant altogether. Netflix understood something Blockbuster didn't want to face. Their own mail-order DVD business was never the final destination. It was a stepping stone towards streaming. By the time streaming became a real mainstream option, Netflix already had the subscriber base, the customer data, and the infrastructure in place. Blockbuster had none of that because it had spent its energy protecting stores instead of building what came next. Transition to point 6. In September of 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, carrying nearly $1 billion in debt. At that exact moment, Netflix had around 20 million subscribers and was preparing to launch its streaming service to the entire world. Today, there is exactly one Blockbuster store left on Earth, a single location in Bend, Oregon, that's become a tourist novelty rather than a business. Netflix, meanwhile, is worth over $250 billion and has fundamentally reshaped how the entire world watches entertainment. So here's the verdict. It's tempting to say Blockbuster's downfall came down to one bad meeting in the year 2000, but that's not really what killed them. What killed Blockbuster was everything that happened after that meeting. 4 years of hesitation, a board focused on protecting the present instead of building the future, and a pattern of moving just late enough every single time to always be catching up instead of leading. That single afternoon in Dallas wasn't the mistake. It was simply the first missed exit on a much longer road. That's the verdict on Blockbuster and Netflix. Every week on this channel, we take another real company, another real decision, and we break down exactly what happened using sources you can actually verify yourself, linked below. If you want to know which company we're putting on trial next, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next verdict.